Good evening, everyone. I had a few minutes in the evening after watching a documentary on Scientology. I thought I'd talk about the general principles behind critical thinking and religion. What it appears to me is that the fight in this lifetime of ours is not just against socialism and communism and fascism and these kind of collectivist ideas which are in the political space, but the fight has also to be against religion. And the reason why I say this is because it's not good enough to educate people in science or politics or history or any such thing, because if they haven't learned to think for themselves, they're going to do something sooner or later that's going to harm society. And what we've seen in this Scientology documentary is how harmful a so-called cult can become and how much damage it can cause by brainwashing people completely. Now, this is not the first time that this thing has happened. We know about cults where people have actually gone and said the sky is falling or the world is going to end this day. They've committed suicide. There are all kinds of cults we have seen. Scientology is another cult. All religions are a cult in some form or shape. Except I would argue, maybe Buddhism. Buddhism is probably, but again, when you look at the performance of Buddhism in many parts of the world, it still has that cult behavior. Buddha is supposed to have encouraged critical thinking, and I write about that in the book Discovery of Freedom. But unfortunately, the end result of all this religion is an organized structure, a system of belief, rather than a system of thought, which is really all about saying, let's ask questions. So that's called the best system possible, where you have only one belief, which is let's ask questions. Now there is no religion which does that except the religion of reason. And so I think virtually all religions become cults, and cults are extraordinarily dangerous. The idea of a state being an important and a fundamental driver of our lives, which is a part of the ideology of socialism and whatever communism and so on. That ideology gives away our thinking capacity, our doing capacity to the state, to the government. What the religions seem to be doing is that they make people give away their entire thinking capacity to their religious system. Now, the worst part of the thinking capacity seems to be that people are gullible enough, if they haven't thoroughly been indoctrinated, trained in critical thinking, they're gullible enough to believe literally anything. I was totally amazed, honestly. I've sort of heard of all kinds of weird things. Religions are extraordinarily weird. If you think about the beliefs, of Christianity, of Islam, and of Hinduism, they are absurd beliefs. There is no logic in any of these things. But Scientology takes the cake. I must say it's pretty much like at the top of the cream in terms of nonsense. The kind of beliefs that the people are told, and they're not told apparently at one go. They're told incrementally, and finally they become so indoctrinated that they cannot get out. So this is the real issue, that if you don't ask question at the first step, then you're going to be into this thing and you're stuck. You enter the deep quicksand. So when someone in a church tells you something about the world being created in 7 days, please ask questions. How the hell is it possible? The whole idea of this whole thing being created, by now at least, hopefully, more than 100 years after Einstein, more than 150 years after the discovery of basic physics and electromagnetism, more than 300 years after after Newton. And of course, Newton was partly religious. He was a kind of a believer in the whole world. He's a pantheist, what they call, the God sets the rules and all that stuff. At least he got out of that crazy nonsense of Christianity. He became like, okay, God can be, God sets up the rules and so on, and therefore we don't know much about him, which is at least somewhat better. But so let's say that all these principles of science were established 300 years, 150 years, 100 years, or even now you take it 50 years, let's say. The knowledge that is there, that the rich knowledge that we have about evolution, about the cosmos and so on, it's been widely disseminated by scientists and thinkers for the last at least 50 years, if not more. So with so much rich knowledge available to anybody who opens a single book, really, There is no book today in any library which talks real nonsense that they should talk, say, 300, 400 years ago. So with so much rich knowledge available, what is missing then is the some kind of a fear. I mean, it's just amazing how children are probably stifled when they ask these questions. Every child, I'm sure, is going to ask questions about religion. How is it possible? How did it happen? And then you must explain. You, the parent, you, the religious teacher, must explain if you can, and you can't. And because you can't, you must simply have the humility to tell the child, like, I don't know. I really don't know how this happened. I expect you to ask this question the whole of your life and then find out the answer. Because this is what we're told to believe, but I can't tell you whether this is true or false. Now it's up to you to make up your mind. I think that honesty, that it's up to the child to grow up and think for himself, that honesty is missing from all these kind of belief systems. Whereas science is only one belief. They're saying that I don't know what is true. This is the current knowledge. This is the current state of information from all the research and all the evidence. And we have this crazy people out here, really atrociously crazy people, who are arguing that, for example, evolution is only a theory, and there's no evidence, and this is absurd nonsense. I mean, how can people talk like this 170 years after the discovery of the evolutionary evolution, or 150 years or whatever? So the amount of evidence is so overwhelming, and you can see it in our day-to-day life in every single thing. Why, please, are you not asking questions? What has happened, I think, is the danger to the world. If you go back to the history of mankind, it's nothing but a history of bloodshed. There is nothing but bloodshed. No matter which country, at what century, you pick it up, you go back 70 years, prior to today, and you find the World War II. People are fanatically believers in some Nazi ideology. You go back to, recently to Mao, you find fanatic believers in some other ideology. You look at the Scientology and the kind of stuff. Now, Scientology is basically they're doing oppression from what the movie says. There's a fair bit of oppression happening, and some beatings and some other such things going on. It's not killings yet. Let's say that they're not basically killing people, okay? But if this continues, then I'm sure there'll be killings happening. The people will start going around doing the same thing that all religions have done, basically stifling questions. What is the meaning of dissent? What is the meaning of it's nothing but asking somebody who asks a question, right? And so these people, I'm told, I was shocked. I really didn't know anything. I don't pay attention to all these actors and actresses. And then I was reading about this guy called Tom Cruise, and he apparently got married to Nicole Kidman, whom I know because I've seen one of her movies. I think Mulan something Rogue. What was it? Anyway, there's a movie I saw about 15 years ago with Nicole Kidman. She's an Australian actress. I recognize her. And apparently these two are married, and that's all fine. There's so many people getting married. I wouldn't know anything about them. But then it turns out that they got divorced, and they were disconnected. Nicole Kidman was disconnected with her children. What kind of inhuman thought that somebody's disconnected? And the word is totally, they brainwashed the children. And this is what Tom Cruise allows, and this is the kind of man he is. I'm definitely not going to watch any of his movies. This is a shocking, unethical behavior. The man called Tom Cruise, he has no ethics. But I don't blame him. At the end of the day, as you can see, with all this socialism and all these things, what I really am trying to do is to fight the idea that there is a truth sitting out there that you don't have to question. And what we need is really this idea of critical thinking. It is so important. The more I think about it, the more I think that at least half my effort should be devoted not to India and not to the reform of India's governance, which is an important thing, but really it should be devoted to the fight for thinking, fight for being human. Why can't we just ask questions? What is wrong with us? Why do we have to believe anything at all? I don't believe in any of these things. Does it mean that I'm somehow less than others? I'm absolutely fine. In fact, I ask questions from everybody. I ask questions of my doctor. I challenge them. If they tell me something, I will say, okay, let me go and study it. And I go and open up the journals, and I check them out. And my own surgeon, the urologist who did the surgery for my prostate cancer, he was wrong. He was misleading me in a certain sense. But at the same time, I decided to let him, do the cutting and all those kind of things, because overall, he at least knows his job. He may be very bad at understanding the total literature on the subject. And he actually had misunderstood the whole literature, by the way, on that issue. But then I made a conscious choice to let him cut up my body. But the point is that I don't believe anything what anybody tells me. I mean, how hard is it to simply say, no, I don't believe you. I will go and check it out myself. You are welcome to your view. You can say what you want. You can believe what you want. I don't care. But what I will do as a standard human being, as a simple human being who knows nothing, is I will go and start checking anything that's important enough for me to really check. And I do check everything. I do check anything that's really significant. Things I give example of the climate, debate and so on. 2008, I finally found some time to really to spend time to really research this issue, because till that time I had not had time to study this issue, but I was simply assuming that scientists are saying this or whatever, and so they must be right. But at the moment I had this different views coming into the picture in the academia, in the newspapers, that it may not be true, etc. I was pretty much okay. Let's assume for a moment that there is a major climate issue. But then I did have to check it, right? It's such an important thing. People keep talking about it and all that. Should I not really know about it? And so I started reading about it in great detail. And I think when I talk about detail, I mean about 1,000 pages of genuine research articles. Now, when I read research articles, could be any scientific article, I actually have fundamental questions in mind, and I'm trying to get the answer. So in the case of, for example, my studies of climate science, my first question was, as it should be for anybody, okay, you say that carbon dioxide causes this particular issue of temperature. Can you show me the correlations, number one, and can you show me correlations going backward in time up to eternity, number one, and apart from the theoretical formula. Number two, can you also show me your actual model of what actually causes temperature? Because that's only one of the many, many factors, and anybody can see that the sun is causing something, the molten magma in the earth is causing something. Can we just have a general formula which tells us what's going on? And I found very quickly, within about a few days of my starting research, that there was nothing. These guys don't have a multivariate formula that's publicly available that actually explains this. They have the so-called climate models, which are really complex, I suppose, but they don't show them that the simple relationship. What proportion of the total climate is caused by carbon dioxide? What's caused by this and that? And the more I studied, I found the carbon effects diminution. I started looking at the science, and I have really found at the end of the day that this is basically a so-called a hype built on almost random variation, and I won't go into details on that issue right now. But let me simply say that this will require explanation in great detail. It's not something I can say in one, but I was giving this as an example of why it is so critical to ask questions and then to spend the time to study it. And if we don't do that, we're going to end up basically believing any Tom, Dick and Harry, or Tom Cruise or Harry, whatever you call them, who are basically fools, who have no clue what the hell. They're actors. They don't even know what they're doing. They're just mimicking somebody as an actor. They have no knowledge of anything. And there are people believing that, okay, because Tom Cruise believes therefore it must be true. Sorry, but it's not true. You have to be trained as a human. I mean, a human is actually quite different to a beast, to one of those beasts out there, the animal kingdom. They may be nice beasts. The beast is not a bad word. The dogs, cats and all, they're nice animals, okay? There's nothing wrong with them. But these creatures cannot think. Human beings have a very high capacity to think. But the thinking capacity is unfortunately hidden. It is hidden from view until you really train the mind to really think. And that thinking capacity is the most important capacity in order to be declared to be a human. Otherwise, you're not a human, really. You're simply a sheep. You're copying somebody else. You're copying your parent. You're copying some kind of religious teacher. You're copying a film star. You're copying who knows what, some so-called alleged IPCC. No, don't follow anybody. Please don't follow anybody. I think that's what I like about Buddha, which he said, do not believe anybody. Find out for yourself. I'm summarizing the whole thing, what he said. And I think he says, don't believe me. And I think that's the point I always emphasize, don't believe me. Please find out for yourself. Now, that idea that everything in the world must be questioned, I really like a guy called Richard Feynman, and many of you know about him. He is the Nobel Prize winner, and probably one of the greatest ever communicators of basic science. Einstein could not communicate basic science as well as Richard Feynman did. And Richard Feynman's writings are, you go to his Twitter account. He's not his Twitter account. Somebody runs an account where they put his quotations. It's the most brilliant set of things. He's basically saying what I'm saying, but he's saying it much better. Because that Richard Feynman is a most brilliant communicator. You need to consider how to think. So this is, I think, my basic message for today, that apart from fighting against communism and socialism, etc., I think we all need to fight against religion being a way that the fundamental issue in religion is belief. Well, then you're gone completely. You're finished. You're not a human being anymore. You're basically a dead person. You're a dead sheep. You're totally defunct as a human being. You're not alive. You can't ask questions. Religion simply says this is how the things happened, and this is a little booklet which said that. But sorry, where is your proof? What are you talking about? Where is this God, that you talk about? Please show that particular God, okay? There may well be a God, and I'm not saying there's no God or there is a God. I'm actually not debating that at this point in time. My point is slightly that there is no God in the form and shape depicted in any religious book. There is none. And that is completely conclusive. And you can think about it yourself if you want. If you have a religious belief, I'm sorry, you're not really a human in that sense. You have to really think twice about what are you doing and why are you doing this. Ask questions, please. If you do that, then and at the minimum, please make sure that your children are not indoctrinated. Please let them become human beings. When they grow up, they start asking questions. Let them continue to ask questions. That is the most valuable gift they have got. The asking questions gift. Let them ask questions. Let them learn about life on their own. Do not tell them anything. Let them learn. Let them learn and teach them how to ask questions if you can. And I think that would be fantastic. All right, that's all for now, and probably we'll talk more on this issue sometime later.